Hello, friends, and welcome to Worldbuild with us, the podcast where we create fantastical worlds with help from you, our listeners. My name is Rob Hilferty, and I'm here with my co-hosts Daniel Quinn and Courtney Staples. On today's episode, we have a prompt from a regular listener, and we've got prog rock and kites and all sorts of interesting stuff on the horizon. But before we get into that, I would like to remind everyone that if you want us to build your world, you can always go to our website, worldbuildwithus.com, where you can click the link, follow some instructions, and within a reasonable amount of time, we'll be building your world. If you want to follow us on social media, we're over on Twitter at Let's Worldbuild, or more importantly, you can follow us and subscribe to us on YouTube, where you can listen to this podcast separately. And we've also got all sorts of fun little stuff over there. I mean, not really. It's basically a podcast in a video format, but still, if you want to come and chat with us more directly, you can come and chat with us on our Discord with a link for that in the description. Or if you're feeling particularly generous or just want patron-only goodies, you can go to our Patreon, give us money, and reap the benefits. Now, with all of that out of the way, let's dive right into today's episode, which comes from, I would say medium-time listener. I don't know if it's a long-time listener, but regardless, it does come from Iris, who you might have heard from before. And their prompt is First Metals, a Bronze Age society built on a prog rock landscape. The tenets, a group of societies settled around floating islands in a bright green coast, barely a cloud in the sky with the temperancy of the Mediterranean. Number 2, the wheel has not been invented, as trade is much easier to perform via kites and boats. The boats being for the ascetics who live under the shadows of the islands. However, writing and metallurgy are in their early stages. Number 3, a star that rises in the evening and sets in the morning lies to the east. It carries ominous stories of prophecy and tragedy to come far into the future. And I'm very excited about this. Normally, I will kick this off to one of my co-hosts. However, I'm going to steal the spotlight because I heard prog rock landscape, but there's not enough prog rock in there for my liking. Thus, I have decided to mold my tenets after my favorite prog rock album, which is In the Court of the Crimson King by King Crimson. So, to kick us off, the islands floating in the sky are ruled by the Black Queen and served by a group of loyal fire witches, while the oceans below are ruled by the Crimson King and his lover, the Purple Piper. However, both sides are being manipulated by a mysterious figure known only as the Jester in Yellow. And that's my first tenet. That's what I got.
That is quite the tenet.
Hey, listen. That's just one song off of the album, okay? Mm-hmm, There's so much rich metaphor in that thing, but that's what I'm going with. I could have went with like Pink Floyd or Yes, but I don't know. In the Court of the Crimson King is my favorite prog rock album. So I'm like, prog rock, sign me up.
So let me get a list here of the things in this tenet. That way I can visualize them.
Sure.
There's a king, and he lives where?
Underneath the islands.
So he's in the bottom. And then there's a Black Queen on the top.
Yes.
And she's got with fire witches.
Yes.
Got it.
Both sides are being manipulated by the Jester in Yellow.
I also like the Crimson King song. That's a nice song.
It's a great song. Yeah. Admittedly, okay, here's the thing. The first tenet is absolutely a lot. It is a lot because there's a lot of really interesting characters and interesting imagery within that song. So the second one is a little bit easier. I will preface that up front. And also, there is also the Purple Piper, who is the lover of the Crimson King, just so we're tossing that out there too. But yes.
Okay.
And yeah, by the way, you can abstract this all to hell if you want to. I'm totally fine with this. Like, I know that this tenet's a lot, so obviously have at it. You know what I mean?
And also, before we continue on, can we define prog rock for our listeners who might not know much about prog rock?
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Sure. So prog rock stands for progressive rock. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like a nebulous term, but it was basically in the 60s and 70s, bands that were pushing what rock and roll could actually sound like and be. So you have bands like Pink Floyd, which obviously added like synth and like other stuff into their sound. You have bands like Yes, who are just like almost like jam bandish in some of their stuff, but you also have stuff like Rush. You have stuff like early Genesis, obviously King Crimson as well, who you might know from the 21st Century Schizoid Man cover that Kanye West stole, or sampled, not stole, obviously. But yeah, that's like kind of a good smattering of what we're looking at when we're talking about prog rock. Is it kind of weird, and does it kind of push the envelope of traditional rock and roll? That's probably what prog rock is going to be in a very overly simplified way.
Is there an experimental quality to it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Not to the point of like, Captain Beefheart, for example. I feel like that's probably a little bit like a step past prog rock and stuff like that, but there's absolutely an experimental quality to it. Yes, Daniel.
Okay. Yeah, I looked up a bunch about it and was like struggling to get a true like definition of what exactly constitutes it, because it does seem like a very large genre that sort of
Yeah,
branches out into a lot of other ones.
you're absolutely right, because it's a really nebulous term. Like that was just kind
Yeah.
of like, is it kind of weird and from this era? It's
Yeah.
prog rock. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like
Right.
because like the way that like subgenres kind of break down, it's like granularity to an extreme, and sometimes one band can fit into multiple subgenres and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So look, all it does is fulfill the human need to categorize things in our little brains, and that's
Mhm.
basically what's going on here. So please, Courtney, why don't you kick us off with your first tenet? What do you got for us?
All right. Mine is that at fairly regular intervals, a new floating island will rise up from the seas. And
Oh,
this causes a brief period of danger on the surface of the ocean due to the waves and such caused by that rising up.
I really love that idea. I think that's
Mhm.
a really cool concept, that occasionally there's just going to be a new island to join the archipelago. Kind of like how, like with regular islands, like the magma continuously uprising does that as well. But I like how it's, a more supernatural and more interesting way to do it this way. That's cool.
Yeah, yeah, I wanted like something to sort of disrupt occasionally and like just add a bit more weirdness to the setting. I mean, it's
Mm,
already
mm,
strange, certainly, but the fact that like I don't know if it would be every century or every decade or whatever, but just a new island
mm,
floats up.
It also potentially suggests a sense of attraction that the
mhm.
islands are being called up either by some
Yeah,
force or
Ooh.
expelled.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, or maybe some kind of inherent magnetism or something like that. Like a magical magnetism, grant you, but still, like that could be kind of interesting to work with. Also, what I think is really interesting about that as well is this idea that each island could trigger a potential gold rush each time, whether it be
Mhm.
for, new land to scramble for, or new resources to mine, or what have you. Like that's a really cool way to add in something new and exciting to your world that happens frequently. That's really dope.
Yeah, yeah. I think it could be cool to see how stuff expands in this world.
Mhm,
And also how, like, the people under the islands, who I think he established was, the Crimson King,
mhm,
they deal with the danger and then also this kind of new area to inhabit too underneath.
mm. I have this like picture in my head of like these boats that are swimming by a newly rising ocean. They're trying to like hold it down like a harpooned whale or something like that. I don't know why I have that image in my head.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like maybe they're like trying to like claim it as their own, or like hold it down in some way. And obviously, it's probably not going to work. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of where my brain went though.
Yeah, maybe it's like a way of harvesting resources that are otherwise gonna get really difficult
Oh yeah,
to get to once it's fully up in the air.
yeah. Like they're basically just calling dibs, right? Like we
Yeah, I
get
think you're
first
right.
grab at it, fuckers. Get out of here. It's yours forever, but we get it for the first couple of moments of life. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool. Oh, that's so rich for all sorts of interesting stuff too. But let's move on for the time being. We can definitely integrate that more as we get more tenants.
Mhm.
So, Daniel, what do you got for us with your first tenet, sir?
Since we're talking about the islands, I had the idea that the islands are buoyed to the earth by these giant chains made of a mysterious alien metal.
Ooh.
Oh.
Oh, so it's not like they're floating or drifting. It's like they are stuck in place.
Yeah, so they can they can move a little bit, but they're attached to these chains
Mm,
that are in the earth.
interesting. Okay, so how does that interact with Courtney's then? Do they come out of the water like attached to chains, or is the attaching of the chains something that has to happen? Like is that a man-made thing basically? Is that an artificial thing, or is it something that just happens?
I think to protect the mystery of it, they probably come out of the ocean with chains attached.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's very interesting and quite strange as well. That's cool.
Very, yeah. Yeah.
They're anchored.
Yeah, yeah, that's so interesting. Because it's like to me, it almost sounds like the people or the entities or aliens that have chained these things down. It's like they're trying to use them as astral kites in some way. Like if kites are going to play a big role in this society, I
Mm.
can't help but feel like these are actually like meteors that they're trying to pull out of orbit or something like that. But that's
Mm.
that's not on the list. That's not a tenet for mine. I'll tell you that right now. Although that is really interesting. I love that. I suppose because we're in the early stages of metallurgy, I imagine that none of them have tried to or have been successful in removing or melting down any of the alien metal. Daniel, is that correct?
Yeah, I was gonna
Yeah,
ask, like, if you had any properties in mind for this metal too?
Ooh, good call. Yeah.
I think just by virtue of it holding in place and floating island, it's probably very powerful, like metal that has tensile
Yeah.
strength that's beyond like even the construction that we're capable of now. I'm thinking of
Mhm.
like space elevator theories of that
Oh
require
yeah.
like a special kind of tensile metal that doesn't exist, or that we can't really construct. So I imagine that's what
Mhm.
it's made of, but I wouldn't think that the society here being pre metal would know how to do anything with it.
Right.
Mhm.
Gotcha. Okay. Do you have an aesthetic for them? Because I'm just picturing them as like big, regular chains that are like tinted green. But
Yeah,
if you're
basically.
thinking of them more like, okay, good,
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
That's totally
Don't really
fine
have
then.
any, whatever you guys want.
Well, I was thinking like, are they cables or are they like links in a
I
chain?
was
You know
thinking
what I
like
mean?
links, like really
Okay,
cool giant
yeah,
ass links.
Mm.
I'm cool with that. I like that idea as well because now you have an obvious place to have a battle, or a set
Mhm.
piece fight is up and down the links of the chain.
Yeah, and, like, depending on how massive the chains are, like, I could see people settling on them because the prompt says,
Oh.
Yeah.
the boats are where the ascetics live under the shadows of the islands, but I do
Mhm.
wonder if they, like, venture up a bit and settle on there too, or if that's, like, a separate faction that's on the chains.
Yeah. Interesting. I didn't picture them as being that big, but that's a really cool conceit if that's the case. It
Mhm.
almost gives me like Wuxia Tower vibes if we do it that way?
Yeah, I think they should be enormous because they're probably, who knows how big these islands are.
Yeah,
Yeah,
true.
yeah.
Yeah, you got like Texas floating up there. That's a pretty big ass island? Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, I guess we'll skip on over to my second tenant, which is mercifully shorter. And it's very simply the inhabitants of the settlements all believe in talking to the wind for favor or to curse their enemies. However, they understand that the wind is capricious and often does not or cannot hear them.
So there's kind of either spiritual or alien presence of this entity that is the wind that does stuff. I guess when
Mm.
they're traveling and might betray them.
Well, I wanted to leave the door open for magic, religion, or technology because I didn't know which way you guys were going to take it overall.
Yeah.
And like it could be literally just a superstition. It could be literally nothing. It could just be the wind, but because kites and sails are a mainstay of their technology, I thought that it had to be really appropriate to have the wind as some kind of entity that is paid reverence in this setting.
Mhm. And I can imagine too, if the islands are tethered and they're moving a little bit, wind
Oh, yeah.
patterns would be important.
Oh,
Mhm.
absolutely. Yeah. trade as well, because they mentioned kites. And this is not actually a tenet, but I'm assuming that when they say that the wheel hasn't been invented, I imagine that that's not like hasn't been invented, just like not utilized very much at all. Because to not have a wheel implies that you're like don't have some things to like rotate or steer like ships and stuff like that. So I'm just under the assumption that the wheel exists, but it is incredibly rare and rarely used outside of like other technology. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I wasn't sure how to interpret that either because I was thinking of like what are those things that they use to process grain? You know what I'm talking about?
Millstone.
Yeah, the millstones. Like those are effectively wheels too.
Right.
Well, my assumption is just kind of glancing at like pre-wheel period, is that it must not be widely used for travel, right? Like it's not a component
Right.
of vehicles, because that's what
Yeah.
Right.
the invention of the wheel really is about, right?
Right. That was my assumption as well, is that like I think what the spirit of the tenet is, we don't want there to be wheeled travel very often, and we want instead to rely on the wind and sails and kite like things instead, which I'm more than happy to do. Like I think that's a really cool thing. But I think like not having wheels is it's a very, very difficult tenet to strictly adhere to if we want to go that far. So I just wanted to toss that out there now so we can kind of talk around it a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think we could kind of go either way with it. Like give
Mhm.
us that really, really strict restriction or just treat it as travel based.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay. Well, maybe one of your second tenets will help us elucidate that process. So, Courtney, speaking of, what is your second tenet? What do you got for us?
Yeah, mine has nothing to do with wheels. um, my second one is that in the spirit of prog rock, the star that carries ominous prophecies does so through song, either literally singing into the night sky or
Mm.
inspiring people to sing the prophecies like oracles
Or sea shanties.
or sea chanting.
That's really cool. I like that a lot,
Mhm.
actually. Yeah. Do you think that that blends well with the idea of the wind in some way? Is the wind the thing that carries prophecy, or?
Yeah, I think it ties in well with yours, whether the wind is carrying this thing or if it's like the people see the wind as another avenue of communication or
Mm, yeah. Hence talking to the wind or singing
yeah.
to the wind. Yeah, that totally makes sense to me.
Mhm.
You
Hmm.
can also see some sort of mechanism put in place to transmit things through the wind, transmit song that way.
Hmm.
Oh, sorry, could you say that again?
Yeah, say more about that, Daniel.
Like if song and wind have some kind of relationship, and there's not really wheel travel, I wonder if there's another way for them to send messages and send prophecy and news, maybe through these songs through the wind. And I could see some alternative, pre-wheel age society
Hmm.
having constructed something to that effect.
Mhm.
Ooh. Ooh. Okay. What about like whistles or something like that as like a way to kind of signal things, like it's a siren effectively, or a
Right,
way to
right.
openly communicate, but all you really have to do is like open some slats and then have the wind whistle through it. And depending
Yeah.
on how you play it, it could also be kind of like a windmill in some way.
Mhm.
Also,
Yeah.
yeah, we need windmills in this fucking situation. So yeah.
You could have these floating like kite-like things that, like you say, like whistle when wind goes through it, and that's how they send messages or something.
That's
Yeah,
super
that's
cool.
what I was
Yeah.
thinking. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's really, yeah. I'm down with this. This is dope. Okay,
Mhm. That's
cool.
very cool.
All right. So, Daniel, what is your second tenet? What are we working with here?
There's talk of the star in this prompt,
Hmm.
and so mine is the star is not a natural phenomenon, nor is it an actual star, and it can be reached by foot, sea, or air.
Okay, say that one more time. So we can get to the star.
Yes, so it's not a natural
Mm.
phenomenon, and it's not a star, and it can be reached by foot, sea, or air.
Okay. So this
Okay.
is kind of like Mount Olympus, where it has this sense of divinity, but it's simply like a place you can go to, or also like the underworld, like as a mythological place that you can actually get to and explore.
Yeah, so they said that it rises in the evening, right?
Yeah.
Mm,
Almost like a moon. So it's like I'm picturing it may seem like that, but it's actually a physical thing that you can get to.
right. Okay, that's cool. That's really
Yeah.
cool.
I'm picturing it now as like another island, like way off in the distance, that because of the rotation of the Earth or some sort of magical pull or magnetic pull, it's only visible at night.
Oh, I like that. And that maybe, and it's the way that it's chained
Oh.
too makes it rise and fall in a certain way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so it looks like a star, right? Which means that it probably looks that it is aglow in some way.
Yeah.
Okay. I've got an entire faction of fire witches over here. Can we just say that this is like that's where the fire witches come from and it's still super super mysterious. So it's basically a second continent and the fire witches are effectively star fire witches?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that could be derived from that. I could see them having a kind of in Game of Thrones, the Red Witch, or whatever she's called,
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
Melisandre.
yeah.
Like maybe they have that mystery to them.
Yes.
Mhm.
That's kind of what I had in mind as well, is this idea that their culture is so different and so foreign that they're going to come across as like semi-alien or just like strange in a lot of ways, especially
Mhm.
because I want them to not say anything about the star, right? Like that is where they're from. They will say nothing about it ever, like that kind of level of secrecy.
I mean, it could say, since prophecy is important from this in the star itself, perhaps they claim to come from the future. Like they come from what is to be foreseen. I mean, maybe that's not literal, but because they would be bearers of prophecy, they can't speak of the future because it would alter things. So they say that the star is where the future is.
Right.
Interesting. 'Cause
Right.
that could also be with my tenet that the star sings the prophecies or inspires people to sing them. Like maybe the fire witches are its oracle singer people.
Maybe they
Ooh.
communicate prophecy through song.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man, I'm picturing that scene in Fifth Element now with the opera singer.
Mhm.
Like deeply like gorgeous and haunting and beautiful and all that stuff. I think that's really cool. So I suppose we should talk about what questions do we need answered before we continue on with this particular setting.
It may be worth taking an accounting of things.
Mhm.
We have islands supported by chains. We have wind that's rather important and has cultural significance. We have song as a way of prophecy. The
Mhm.
sun is a physical place that rises, and it's some sort of a continent where the fire witches come from. There's a Black Queen on the islands. There's a Crimson King under below, and then the lover, which I forgot. And I'm missing some tenets.
The islands coming out of the sea.
Oh, islands rise out of the sea periodically. That's where they come from.
There's also the jester in yellow who manipulates everyone. So that's also a thing that's in there too.
Where was the jester at? Again?
In my first tenet.
Oh, I meant like because I know that the purple Piper was with the Crimson King. Is the jester like in a particular place or?
No, I like to keep him as like a mysterious kind of like otherworldly figure, if anything, kind of like Haster's the King in Yellow, or just like just a folklore figure that could actually be like an Illuminati type situation, but they call it the Jester in Yellow, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Again, I'm totally up for interpretation and abstraction when it comes to this kind of stuff.
So then, I mean, there's clearly a relationship to discover between the below and the above. It's a triangle, like there's below, above, and then there's the future or where the red star is.
I agree. Yeah, that's a good place to start, I suppose, huh?
I hadn't written this down as a tenet, but had thought about like these ascetics were living under the island because they were like something about feeling like they were unworthy of seeing the star or like being under its light, and that's like their cultish religion where they live in the shadows because they feel like they're undeserving of its prophecy or its light or its song maybe.
Yeah, I thought that was also pointed as well because it's not like they live beneath the islands. It's very specifically in the shadow of the islands, which is a very cool detail.
I mean, we could maybe part of this would be giving these figures you've created some names that fit into the setting more. So like instead of Crimson King, maybe it could be like the King in Shadow. That way we know where they're located, right? And then instead of the Black Queen, she seems to be exposed to light because she's above. So she could be something like the Crimson Queen, since the red sun's light would cast on her, right?
I fully reject that naming convention, but I'm cool with like playing around with the names, but I'm not gonna cede on the Crimson Queen part. I reject that entirely. I'm sorry.
Is there a reason why?
Yes.
Can you explain what it is?
Because it's not in the song, Daniel.
Oh, okay.
This is not a logic-driven process, I assure you. So we can talk about that. Maybe that actually implies some kind of history. You're right, because
That's what I'm trying to get at. Like,
Yeah,
in
no.
order to embed, like, so, we have a veneer of prog rock. That's the intent, but we want to be inspired by it, right? So I'm trying to think of ways to reconfigure the ideas to fit into the setting. So, like,
Sure.
I don't care what the queen is called, but something that suggests her position, right? So she's above,
Right.
she's bathed in
Well-
light. She's not shadow,
The Sky Queen or something.
right, or something like that. Yeah.
Well, what we can consider as well is that perhaps where we are in history, that this is a subversion of the norm, right? Because I think you're right, Daniel. I think that the implication with the names would suggest that the Crimson King should be up in the sunlight, right? Like that is typically what we would associate with the color we would associate with light with the sun is something like a red or a yellow, right? So maybe the naming convention here suggests that there was a recent rebellion or a recent like toppling of established norms or something like that. Because we also, I just realized this, that we have a king and a queen, but we don't really know if they're of two separate royalties or are they like separated, or like, is this just the result of a very bloody divorce or something like that?
Mhm.
Like there's a lot that we can consider with that.
It would be interesting if perhaps the queen comes from the future and she's a prophet who has rejected their ways, maybe.
Oh, you mean they're
Uh,
from the sun or the star, I
Mhm.
suppose? That's fun. That's a fun place that we can start with for sure. Yeah. So
mhm.
yeah, maybe this makes sense that the Crimson King is a deposed king, someone who is literally thrown from their high throne down to the depths below, survived, and now they're like planning to try and reclaim their kingdom in some way. Or they're just like drinking themselves into a stupor. I'm just tossing it out there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking too, like, to steal something from your campaign, Daniel, the God Beyond the Portal one, where you have the couple that's been separated. They're leaders who were married or were together, had a child together, and are now split apart. And that could
Ooh.
also apply here.
So then maybe if that were the case and they were united front, we could say maybe that the king's island has been broken and that's why he's ascended.
Mm.
Oh, like it at some point was one island and was fractured apart.
Mhm. And maybe its chain
Ooh.
is also broken.
Ooh.
Oh, and that would imply something incredibly powerful, like especially if historically that's the first and only time a chain has broken. Like that is a massively important event that would happen. And that's a really cool thing that we can consider.
Yeah, and like I also don't want to lose sight of Daniel what you said about the queen perhaps being from the future or
Mm.
being from the star in some way or having been touched by the star. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But like that could also tie into what I was saying about like the king's people, the king's court feeling like they're unworthy of the star, or
Mhm.
its prophecy or its light.
We could to do what you're saying there, we could say that the king, being now cloaked in shadow, like is like Rob was saying, either sad or forlorn, because then his people would also be, right?
Yeah,
And perhaps that has to do with the loss of the lover, like the queen.
yeah. Like he's basically like in mourning for his relationship, and that's why he's just hiding in shadow for this long.
And I think part of this is not squaring the circle, but the triangle we have here and that's why I'm trying to connect the queen to the sun, because
Yeah,
you can see the sun at night, it would seem. And I don't know what the other cycle is like in this world in terms of its day night, but if she's
Mhm.
above, the world is going to be cloaked in red whenever it's night.
Are we considering maybe that the islands that we're inhabiting currently are also the other star's star, if that makes sense. Like where the queen is from, maybe they're the ones who are like, I'm going to reach the prophetic star only to recognize that it's just
Uh,
another island.
oh, I see. So it's like the distance creates some sort of glow around the bodies of islands or something.
Something like that. Yeah. Or
Yeah.
there's a property of the mineral or the chains, perhaps, that also give them a glow. So
Mhm.
I'm imagining that if this is purposeful, right? Like the positioning of the chains of the islands, then maybe it is an energy transfer of some way. Like if you're looking at it, like they don't have the opportunity to, right? Like because they're stuck on these tiny little rocks. They're still in basically the Bronze Age, right? But from them, they see the star and it glows from them to them. And then there's a third one that is beyond their horizon that they cannot see. And it basically encircles the world in some kind of a chain or something like that.
Mhm.
Which I think actually, Courtney, your tenet about the islands rising every
Mhm.
so often implies that eventually we will get a fully connected landmass that wraps around in some way, or at least fully connects the worlds together.
Yeah, I was thinking like maybe there's some sort of pattern to how they rise, or
Yeah.
it's going to create something greater once it's all in place.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of an interesting conceit to work with. Did you say how long you were expecting in between, or even how big these new islands would be?
No, I didn't specify, just regular intervals, and I was tossing out like maybe it's a decade, maybe it's 50 years, maybe a century.
Oh, so there's a long time period, is what you're suggesting.
Yeah, like a decently long amount of time.
Okay.
The only resistance I have to the islands glowing is that it diminishes the narrative value of the red one, because now it's just
Mm,
one among many. And I think there's a certain mystery to it, especially since it's introduced individually in the prompt as a tenant.
Mhm.
mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a valid point. Yeah. So there's a special significance to the star, even though I think we can still keep the thing about it kind of like connecting eventually, right?
I do like that. Like, I like the idea
Mhm.
that perhaps these are all connected in some way, because obviously they have
Mm.
chains coming out of them. They were intentionally set up that way.
Right.
So
Yeah.
Right. I'm also curious about the release, like if that's intentional or how it's intentional, if it is.
Yeah, like if whatever created those chains is still beneath the earth and is doing this
Mm.
purposefully, or if it's some like ancient thing that um it had been holding the earth together, but now that's wearing off over time.
I think the chain thing seems to me inadvertent. Like, that I think seems to be the work of the people who live here. Like,
Mm.
whether it's accidental or by whatever means, I don't know how they would have done it, considering this very powerful metal, but
Yeah.
I feel like the people are responsible for this, because that seems to be part of the reason why there's a rift between the two characters who created.
Hmm.
Hmm. Okay. Maybe what we can do is we can go through and give a little recap of our tenets so we can figure out where to go next. How's that sound?
Mhm.
All right. So I started us off this time. Very weird, but effectively, I've created three factions. We've got the Black Queen with her fire witches. We've got the Crimson King and his lover, the Purple Piper, and then the mysterious figure known as the Jester in Yellow. That was my first tenet. I think that the interplay between the Crimson King and the Black Queen is interesting. I also think that tying the Fire Witches and the Queen to prophecy, the future, and the star in the horizon is a really cool conceit. And I'm happy with what we've got thus far.
Yeah, I still think there's room for more abstraction or
Oh,
something
for sure.
as we
Yeah.
move on.
Like, for example, right? Like, I'm cool with either of those named things not even being human or humanoid. Like, if you wanted the Black Queen to be like a religious figure or like a cloud of black ash that is somehow sentient or something like that, like, I'm also cool with that, like just tossing out random ideas in terms of abstraction and whatnot. But maybe we can get through that like once we do a little bit more recapping. So Courtney, I think you were first up after me. What was yours? What did you have us do?
That was that at regular intervals, a new floating island will rise up from the seas, and that causes like waves beneath, which creates a dangerous surface on the ocean.
Gotcha. How do you feel? Do you feel like we've integrated that well, or do you feel like there's something we're missing?
I think that definitely the rising up of the new island has been integrated, but we haven't really discussed the danger much yet.
I suppose that's true, right? Like we haven't really talked about the effect of what a new island does.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And like how it would disrupt if the Crimson King is below with his people, his court, like how it disrupts their life when that happens.
I'm just trying to think, what can we do with that, Because it happens so infrequently, right? We're talking about once a decade at minimum, right? So it could be even longer. So are you suggesting that each of these is like a cataclysmic event in some way, or something massively huge happens?
I wouldn't say like apocalyptic to that extent really, but it's definitely like pretty big and would be a big disruption to people down on the surface of the ocean.
Maybe what we can consider is, what do the new islands introduce to the ecosystem? Like, is it new creatures, new living things, or new sentient life forms being discovered on these islands? Is it new minerals? Like, what does this bring that is disruptive? Because the rising itself might not necessarily be did you say destructive specifically, or is it disruptive?
Dangerous.
Okay. Well, maybe we can take that and mean like it's like culturally dangerous in some way. Or I don't know. There's a bunch of different types of danger that we can kind of mess with here,
Or yeah, I specified like due to the waves on the surface of the ocean.
Oh, it's the waves specifically? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Or like waves and related disruptions there, yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, if that's the case, then it's definitely like the aesthetics who are sitting, underneath the waves, underneath the shadows and stuff like that. I mean, when this thing rises, it's going to suck in everything around it, right? Kind of like how, you're playing in the pool, you're playing in the tub or something like that. When you put something down, it sucks everything around it. I imagine the same thing's going to happen. It's going to suck everything in and then immediately dump everything out. So it could just be like tidal waves, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a simple one that you can kind of mess with. Oh man, we didn't even get to the part where people could be living on the chains. Fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that could be a thing as well. There's so much to the setting already. Damn. Okay.
I mean, I think something that the setting lacks is a genre, really, and like an overall genre intent. Like right now, we've got kind of arbitrary things spattered every place, and a veneer paint of some prog rock names. But what I think we need is an understanding of what genre is this stuff being created inside of. Like right now, I don't know if it's fantasy. I don't know if it's some form of far future sci-fi that's evolved into fantasy. So I think we have to decide what that is.
It's funny you should mention that, because I definitely think that this has like your Hunter from the Future vibes, or Daniel, you love to bring up the Shadow of the Torturer. What's that series called again? It's not Dying Earth, but
the Book of the Long Sun.
Book of the Long Sun. Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, because we can definitely do something like that where it is because you've introduced the alien tech part of it, right? And so there's to me, it certainly seems like there's been a big reset button that's been pressed.
Right. So if we decide on something like that, then you can have the literal, the actual intent that's in the story. So like if you think of like that particular story, on the one hand, we know outside of the perspective of the characters of the story that this is actually a laser gun, but the characters know that think of it as some fire lance or something. We can make those decisions in constructing the setting. So then we can ask questions like, well, if these islands come out of the ocean at intervals and they're attached by chains, is the planet some kind of structure? Is it some kind of device? Like what is actually happening here versus what the narrative tells us from the point of view of the characters as they explore it, because they may get a totally different feel, something about, I don't know, religious revelation or whatever with the sun and all of that, which you can emphasize in the story and have people feel that. But to know how things function, you have to decide like, okay, it actually is science fiction underlying this.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm fine with what we've got thus far in terms of like genre, in terms of like Dying Earth or a reset apocalypse type situation. I think that there's also stuff that suggests moving in that direction besides the tenets that we've created, like the idea that there are no clouds in the sky or barely a cloud in the sky, which means that there's either very little rain or very little water. Plus, there's the bright green coast as well. Like we haven't even touched on the eerie kind of color of the coast at all and the tenets that are set up. Or it could just be we're on an alien landscape, like maybe this is the remnants of a crashed ship or something like that. There's so much that we can do here. So yeah, I'm totally down with like pushing us in a direction for sure.
Mhm.
So if you took, for example, the idea of a crashed ship, perhaps deep under the ocean, you have some terraforming device that wraps these chains around parts of the earth to transform them and then kind of lets them out, right? Then you could have the descendants of the people who crashed being the ones who descend from the king or the queen. So now we have some kind of chain of record to work with, and then you can cloak that in whatever mystery you want.
A chain
Yeah.
of events, perhaps. Yeah.
Yeah, I do like the idea of a crashed ship because that would make sense for like parts of the ship or parts of its terraforming remnants to like over time kind of break apart from the main ship and float upwards. Especially if there's some like weird gravity propulsion going on or something. And then like the star in the east could be another part of the ship. It could be its like nuclear reactor that's sending off all this light still.
I think that works because now it seems like there is a purpose to the chains in that there's a crew working on freeing the ship from whatever crash site happened to it, right? And that the result of these islands rising up is okay, we've got another island that we can remove because I'm just imagining that this massive ship is like encased in rubble, right? Like massive state-sized rubble in some points. And so what they have to do is like hit it with some kind of anti-grav thing. And maybe it's not just that you need to remove the rubble, but it's attempting to pull the thing out of the ocean as well, or out of the crash as well.
That's interesting because I was interpreting it as like not necessarily a purposeful thing, but I could also see that like there is still a crew under the ocean on this thing that's trying to free it, but it could also be like more of a just organic process over time of the ship breaking apart beneath the sea and like rising up slowly.
You could have both. You could have, this natural degradation happening, and perhaps a very thousands of years removed cult of the engineer that doesn't know what they're actually doing anymore because they're just following the sacred rites of the technical manual that they don't understand. And they're trying to do something on one of these chains and they're following the rites and they broke the chain in one case, right? And so this cult of engineers like is actually trying to restore things. They just don't know what they're doing,
Yeah.
Okay. I think I've got an idea about that. We can tie it to the fire witches coming from the star, right? Because I like the idea that the star, because Daniel, you said that, they're from the future. It's not that they're from the future, is that they just remember the past, right? They remember what they were before the ship crashed.
Yeah, I meant it metaphorically speaking. So like,
yeah, no, I'm supporting you in that for sure.
Right.
Yeah, but their memory is imperfect in some way, right? And again, to go back to this idea that the Black Queen is not like a figure, not a humanoid, I'm thinking that the Black Queen could be a remnant in the fact that they're like a black cloud of nanobots in some way, and they are like barely connected to a system within the ship, like broken and on the fritz, but still trying to connect those two things together.
Yeah, I was gonna say that the Black Queen could be like the ship's AI, like the mother computer kind of thing.
Yeah, something like that. Sure.
And if you have a king that's in shadow below, it could very well have been the love relationship could be the creator of the AI or its operator.
Yeah.
So now I'm thinking, are these figures that we're dealing with here, are the people of these islands, are they immortal and they've just like become so detached that they've forgotten things, or I don't know. I think that there's something there to it because there has to be something that explains the lack of intelligence or lack of memory that's going on here for the most part.
I think that what's happening here is that the named figureheads are really software or remnants of this ship, and then the living people who populate this world are descendants of the people on the ship, like they're actual people.
I'm totally
Yeah,
down with
I
that.
like
Yeah,
that.
for sure.
So I can easily see, 1,000 years from now, HTML, like no one will, we will understand some of these languages, like some of the actual
Right.
programming languages,
Right.
like will be ancient. Even now, there's only a handful of engineers who understand COBOL, which most of our like government systems run on. So I
Mhm.
could see in a distant future, an ancient machine that was sent to terraform the world or whatever it does, like I could see a technical manual being seen as this divine text,
Yeah, yeah.
Mm. Interesting.
And then like the songs or the prophecies that come from the Night Star thing could be like
Mhm.
recordings.
Oh, transmissions, yeah.
Yeah, recordings and transmissions that are coming through
Mm.
still and are carried
Mhm.
on the wind.
And this doesn't
Mm.
mean that you have to lose the Bronze Age requirement of the prompt
Right.
either, because you can present the setting in that way, and you can have, this is an RPG,
Absolutely.
you can
Yeah.
have barbarian characters and they have a sorcerer, but the underlying explanation is this distant science fiction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
Yeah, no, that works for me. I also like the idea that now we've abstracted the figureheads to the point where we can truly like warp their physiology to the point where it's like, oh, we can go hog wild and make them gross and otherworldly and, truly feel divine or truly feel like royal in a way that, you think about like a peasant in the Middle Ages seeing the king. It's like, wow, that's a god figure right there. I like the sense of awe that royalty can evoke in that sense.
Mhm.
Well, Daniel, we're still in the recap.
Yeah.
Holy shit, we've got so much going on here. Daniel, what was your first tenet? Can you remind us?
I mean, I think both of mine are explained by this conversation. So on the one hand, the star is not natural; it's physically reachable. That we've explained, and the islands are buoyed by the chains, which now we understand why.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So that brings us back to my second tenet, which is the concept of the wind, and people beseech the wind in various ways. Uh, I feel like we can certainly integrate that better. And I think that in order to do so, we should consider that the wind are manifestations of the various AI figures or various parts of the ship that we've created, the named figureheads, right? And I'm okay kind of pointing to that as the explanation for what the wind is. What do you think?
Yeah, like the wind could even be the radio waves that are transmitting these things. Like
Yes.
can abstract that a lot too.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That's an interesting kind of way to do it.
Yeah, and there's, it could be a mixture of things. It could be that understood as that, but also understood as simply the actual wind patterns in the world.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
like the society still deals with regular
Yeah.
aspects, but
Yeah.
there is also the truth that there are transmissions in the wind. So
Okay. Again, if we're doing far future stuff, one of my favorite parts about the Numenera setting is that they had this thing called the red or the rust wind, I think it was called, and it was this concept of a massive storm of nanobots that would rust anything that it kind of came in contact with, and it was incredibly dangerous. But I'm not suggesting that we do something dangerous like that, but I do think the idea that the wind, like messages get carried in the wind, are actually like nanobots that are kind of like floating by, creating this kind of like shimmer or aurora borealis type of effect. That could also explain the wind both as like this mystical thing and as Courtney's second tenet, right?
Yeah. No, I think it all works really well together.
Yeah.
And yeah, my second tenet was that the star that carries the ominous prophecies does so through song, either literally singing or inspiring people to sing. And yeah, I think that totally works. Like the singing is these transmissions, and maybe the fire witches are still connected to it in some way, such that they pick up on those signals and can translate them.
Yeah. That's cool. Do they amplify the messages or some in some way? Like they interpret the messages and then they just sing them in chorus and choir together?
Yeah, like It could be maybe they're receiving incomplete transmissions that they then fill in, or they each get parts of the transmission and have to come together to sing the full thing.
Oh, that's interesting too. Yeah, that would give each one kind of this importance together. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Okay. Well, as per usual, the recap of the tenets has really helped kind of crystallize what the setting looks like overall. I guess we roll for the twist now, right?
Yeah.
Let's see how it goes. So our twist this time is aliens did it. Well, okay, how do we square this exactly? And who are the aliens and what did they do?
I mean, I feel like probably the easy explanation is that the people who crash landed on this planet are the aliens, that they're crashing in, introduced all of this stuff to the planet, and that's why all of this is occurring in the first place.
If you wanted to invert that, we can do a scavenger's reign kind of approach and say that the people who crash landed are just like, normal as humans, but the interplay between this planet's life and their technology has created this alien effect of everything that we're encountering.
Yeah. So like it's only happening this way because of the nature of the planet itself.
And you could then say the wind isn't necessarily a phenomena that has to do with transmissions, but it's part of, I don't know, communication with the world itself, or the world maybe the world incorporating this crashed object into itself.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah, so the world itself is kind of infusing the technology with a semi level of consciousness that is of the world itself. That's really cool. Okay. So these manifestations of the named characters that we have, the kind of like Black Queen, the Crimson King, etc., they're actually manifestations of the consciousness of the world itself. Is that right? Is that what we're going with?
Well, they've been altered. Maybe they're software, but they've been altered by the planet.
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Okay, that's really cool because that feels really alien, especially because like over time, right? These are immortal figureheads that are there. And, one generation of humans isn't going to notice that the changes in the Crimson King or the changes in the Black Queen. But over time, you see this slow change in their physiognomy or psychology to the point where it's like, oh no, this is the planet speaking through the Black Queen now, stuff like that. Yeah, that's really cool. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and then I feel like with that length of time, it totally makes sense that the history has been lost or changed in a way and isn't quite remembered, especially as like the people were originally adapting to the planet and trying to figure out how to survive, and were so focused on that they kind of lost the records of what was actually happening.
Lost or purposefully obfuscated by the leaders, right? Like this planet is suddenly like, oh, I like being revered as these figureheads, so let's get rid of the history so they can continue to be stuck and revere me in some way.
Interesting.
I mean, I could see that going either way, depending on what you wanted to do with the plot.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So we leave it kind of ambiguous. Is that what you're saying?
Could be like a GM's decision, if it was a game. How much intricacy do they want to add to it, right?
Gotcha. Cool. All right. Well, I feel like we don't really need to make a faction for this particular setting, but I do feel like we do need a main storyline quest. So what are we looking at here in terms of a main storyline? What do we got for ideas?
Like, I suppose the kind of grand overarching plot would be like traveling to the star, making your way over there. But we could also have something a lot smaller and more intimate that's just like following a group, maybe colonizing an island that's just appeared.
Oh yeah. See, that's certainly more the type of story I'm interested in. This idea that there's a new continent that has just arisen, and maybe it kind of changes the game in some way that we haven't previously established.
Yeah, and I think thematically, we'd probably want to cloak that in something like Bronze Age feeling. So I'm trying to think of like the closest thing to a Bronze Age story I could think of, like Conan, I guess. And a lot of that has to do with these unconquered vistas. So having a newly arisen island is a good setting for that, I think.
Absolutely. Plus, there's also, if we want to think about stories from antiquity, we can consider Atlantis or Troy.
Right.
There's a number of things that we can pull from that might be interesting there.
Yeah, like could be focused around a group that's been sent over to explore and map out this new realm, make sure it's safe for more people to venture over on like these kite things.
Sure. Kind of like a Jason and the Argonauts type situation as well.
Yeah, that would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we're doing that, I would like there to be Ray Harryhausen skeletons that they have to fight. So
Of course. Can't not have this.
Yeah, I mean, come on, you got to pay homage to the master, right? But yeah, what kind of story from antiquity do we want to pull from? Because I think that's probably the easiest thing that we can do in order to root this in a quest line, is we can point at one of the myths, like Jason and the Argonauts, and then add our own fun little twist to it.
I do think that one works. Like thinking about maybe each island that comes up has a certain like technology or relic on it somewhere that's like from part of the ship, and it's basically like people venturing forth to get it so that they can bring it to their Black Queen and like bestow it upon her as a gift. But it's like basically her like soaking up more information from the ship or something.
Oh shit! Wait,
I mean, that could be a plot of the Red Witch people, that they're intentionally having these heroes collect this stuff to restore parts of the ship.
Yeah.
No, that's really cool. Like I love the idea that the Black Queen is somehow incomplete, and by feeding her more of this material, you're making her more complete, more powerful, and perhaps more connected with the rest of the ship. That's really cool. And you can frame it like a Jason and the Argonauts situation where it's like, oh, we've got to go recruit Hercules, right? And it's just like a hero on an island somewhere, or you got to go gather the next person who's from the ships below or from the chains themselves, because
exactly.
everyone's a hero in these stories. So I think that's really cool. Holy shit, that's cool. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, I'm down. I'm here. I'm here for it. I'm absolutely here for it. All right, cool. Well, there we, and then alternatively, of course, you could be like, well, I want to play the Hercules character. Like, okay, there you go. You're Hercules now. There we, oh, wait, hold on. To bring back the Ray Harryhausen stuff, because we're now dealing with a future or like a weird, like partial future, we can have Bubo the Clockwork Owl. We can have him now. He's in the story. Clearly, you guys have no love for Ray Harryhausen. Come on, he's great.
But like, yeah, like a session 0 could almost be like a romp through these areas, like describing how each character joins the party or something.
Oh, that's really fun. And then you get to add to your legend as as you're rolling the character, basically.
Yeah.
Actually, that sounds like a really fun way that you can integrate like character design or character creation. Because there's in like Mongoose Traveler, for example, right? The character creation, the way that works is that you can literally die in character creation by rolling stuff. And it's like, oh, I rolled poorly and I guess I died before the story even happened, right? And I feel like that's a really fun thing. It's like, all right, now roll for the 7 feats that you did before this particular mission. And maybe that's how you determine your stats or like what you're good at in some way. Like I outwitted, like the Minotaur in the Labyrinth type situation,
Yeah, exactly.
Heroic feats as a way to create a character sounds really cool. And I kind of want to do that. I want to integrate that somehow, some way.
Yeah, I think it would be a really fun way to start a game like that.
Well, I'm happy. Daniel, any closing thoughts? Anything else before we continue on?
Nope. I'm always a fan of Greek mythology of some kind, so I think that's nice.
Gotcha. All right. Well, if that is the case, then that's going to do it for this episode of World Build with us. A big thank you to Iris for submitting this prompt, and a big reminder to all of you that if you want us to build your world, you can always go to our website, worldbuildwithus.com, where you can click the link, follow some instructions, and within a reasonable amount of time, we'll be building your world. If you want to follow us on social media, we're on YouTube, where you can click subscribe and listen to us in a different way. And help us out really with the machine gods and all that. You can also follow us on Twitter at Let's Worldbuild. You can come talk to us more directly by joining our Discord, with a link for that in the description. Or if you're feeling particularly generous, you can always go to our Patreon and give us money and get extra sweet patron-only goodies in return. Thank you so much for listening. We love you very much, and we're going to get through this together. Until next week.